I think you can attract things. I kind of had like near-death out-of-body experience, which is why I feel like I attract certain things. And that's why I feel like I was targeted in the house. I was like 7 and I got sick with meningitis. And then I got encephalitis. And I had to be induced into a coma, which lasted for 3 months. It was a scary experience. And like one that changed my life like completely. Like I woke up paralyzed. I was like not supposed to even be alive. I woke up like a day before they were gonna take me off of life support, so off of the machines. So during those 3 months, like I couldn't open my eyes, but I could hear everything, like the sounds of the machines, and even my mom like telling me stories at night. I would come in and out of consciousness, and it was it's an indescribable feeling of feeling helpless and trapped, because you want to comfort your mom and be like, oh, like I'm okay, like you don't have to cry anymore, because like I was seeing stuff in the hospital. I had to be moved from a couple of rooms a couple of times, because once I learned how to talk again, I was like, I don't feel comfortable here. There's a man here. He won't leave me alone. This happened a couple of months into moving into our new house. It's a 2-story house. So when you walk into the house, it's like a straight hallway, and then immediately you have the upstairs, and then you have the downstairs, and then it's the walkway to the kitchen. And at the time, everything was covered in carpet, because it was an old man that lived there. And this happened like years ago. Right off the bat, moving in, we were very uncomfortable. I don't know, we just felt just creeped out, and we couldn't really explain it. We could not sleep the first night, and my parents just like dismissed it. Oh, you just need to get used to the new house. And we're like, yeah, okay. But something just didn't feel right, and things would happen here and there, and it was things like we'd hear our names being whispered in our ear, or like us calling out to each other when there was nobody in the room. You know, we didn't even want to deal with it. It's just in our mind. We just didn't want to even tempt the thought. And one night, it was me and my sister were sitting in the kitchen. It was pretty late in the night, and we would usually do that. We're kids. It was cool to be up late at night. And we were eating cereal, just in the counter, talking. And we hear my mom get up from her room. And we're like, we're gonna get in trouble. So we just sat there and we're like, oh, okay. We're waiting to get yelled at, because it wasn't the first time. And we didn't hear anything, so we both turned to look at the stairs, because from our where we were sitting down, we could see the stairs and the hallway that led into her room. And so we both turned to look, because it was weird that we didn't hear her start to nag about why we were awake and look at the time it was. So we turned, and I turned to my sister and I was like, hey, do you see Mom? She was like, no. And I was like, okay. So we heard the footsteps coming out of her room. and it kind of stopped before coming down the stairs. And you could clearly see everything. Like, it was clearly visible. And we just froze. We're just like, we hear something, but we don't see anything. And then you hear, also, my house is like very creaky. Like, super creaky. You can hear everything. Like, every step you can hear. It's so loud, it's annoying. So we hear her footsteps come down the stairs. And we're still looking, just staring at the stairs, and we're just like, at this point, we just didn't know what to do. We're just quiet. And once I got down the stairs, there's another hallway that goes into the kitchen where we were at. And at this point, I looked at my sister and I was like, hey, like, I don't see anything. And she was like, me either. Like, we both didn't see anything. And so you hear the footsteps come down the steps and then down the hallway into the kitchen where we're at. And there's a step right before you come down into the kitchen. And the kitchen is a different floor from the rest of the house. So up until now, all you hear is creaky footsteps because it was all carpet. And the kitchen floor was tile. So when we heard it step down into the kitchen, all you heard was like claws. It was terrifying. It was crazy because there was like a couch blocking a little bit of when you come down to the doorway. And so automatically we hear claws and we're like, oh, it's our dog. Which is weird because I thought that my sister had put the dog in the garage, which was where it stayed at night. But we both didn't say anything. So as soon as we heard that, I called out to my dog. And nothing happened. It was just pure silence. Well, it felt forever, but it was just a few seconds. So once at that point, like, we had stood up because we're checking to see if we see our dog. And at the same time, we're like creeped out. So we stood up. And then, like, we hear our dog like start to go crazy in the garage behind us. So usually at night we put our dog in the garage, and we had called out to it and it was silent. Like, my dog did not make a sound when I called. But it was like a few minutes before I'd say everything just went crazy, where it started to run towards us. We heard our dog start like barking like really aggressively. And this was like happening in front of us. And we're like, oh, like it had dawned on us that wasn't our dog. So at the same time that we took off running in the direction of that sound, because we had to go across it to get out of the kitchen. At the same time that we were running, we could hear the footsteps, the clawy footsteps, like run toward us. But the thing was that, one, it didn't sound like it had many feet. It only sounded like it had 2 feet. And two, those footsteps were like heavy. We took off, we ran upstairs to my mom's room. And at this point, like, we were like cheering up. We were crying and we were like yelling for my mom to wake up. In that moment, It's the exact moment where you feel your heart drop like out of your body, where you're like, it's the moment where it hits you that it's real. And it felt aggressive. Like it didn't even happen. This happened in a matter of minutes, but it was the silence and it was the prominent footsteps where there was weight to it. Enough for you to think that it was a real person, like heavily walking down the stairs. And that's what scared. Apart from that, like that's what made us jump and run. For a long time, we could not talk about it without tearing up. That's how terrified we were. And we're like, oh my god, like we heard something, and we couldn't even talk from like how terrified we were. And my mom basically was like, she got mad at us and was like, oh, it's your fault for being up this late. This is what you get for watching scary movies. And like totally dismissed us. But I would have thought I was crazy if my sister wasn't there to experience it. And that was like one of the first concrete encounters in that house, which, man, that house really messes with your head.
Karina then begins to discover what is going on in her house. Up next.
The house had been vacant for 7 years. And this was a beautiful house. Like, it was in a good neighborhood. Like, it had no reason to be empty for that long. So I thought that was weird. For a long time, I would tell myself, you have to be crazy to be here, because most of the time I was the only one that would experience like hardcore stuff. This was one of the first experiences where it was me and another person. We would hear stuff and like small things would happen. It was things that you could be like, oh, it's in my mind. But it seemed like I was the target for it. You'd be sleeping or doing something and you would hear like one of either your name or one of my sister's names whispered in your ear, but to the point where you could feel the breath of the person. And I was like, okay, I was dreaming, okay, like maybe I was distracted. And this happened to everyone. One of the scariest times was I was in the bathroom and we're having a cookout, but everybody was outside. And usually we come inside to do things. And I was downstairs, which is where most of the activity will happen. So I was in the restroom, I was washing my hands, and I had stopped and I was like drying my hands. And I heard laughing. And I was like, I called out to my sister. I was like, oh, I called out, God, stop messing with me, like you're scaring me. And no answer back. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna kill her. Because we were all creeped out. And so I went out, because our rooms are connected. So my room was connected to hers by the bathroom. So I walked out into her room. I looked behind the door. I looked all over her room and there was nobody there. And then I heard a whisper in my ear and it was like, Karina. And I was like, oh. And I was like, okay. And I couldn't move. I was like frozen. I wanted to run up the stairs so bad, but I was like, you know that moment where you're so scared you like freeze, but you want to move? I was like that. So I slowly walked out And when I was like in the kitchen, that's when I ran. And everybody goes outside. My room, for some reason, was the coldest. It would get cold. My room was like the coldest room in the house. And it would get cold out of nowhere. And so the reason I tell you is how I found out that it was haunted was these experiences got so bad that I was literally driving myself crazy. Being like, it can't be real. Like, it's all in your head. Maybe you want to believe something is here. Like, maybe you want the attention, or I was trying so hard to make sense of it. But it got so bad that I couldn't sleep because I could feel it. I could feel it walking to my room. Like, it's hard to describe, but I could hear it and feel when they would walk into my room. And that's what was driving me insane. I'm like, how can I have to be like crazy? Like, how did somebody hear something come into a room? So the best way I can describe it is that the sound of silence when it's quiet and you hear like that, like almost like a light buzz. It was like if that light buzz would get really loud, but it was silence and it was loud enough for you to be like, almost like when your earrings, but silence. That's how it would let me know that it was there. I would hear the sound of silence, like almost volumed up. And I could feel it walking to my room because it was like automatically, it was like feeling like when you know somebody's looking at you without you actually seeing them. It's like that feeling where you happen to look because you feel something. So I would just happen to feel something like come into my room or wherever I was at. It drove me insane. I was in a dark place, like really depressed. I wouldn't sleep throughout the night. I would wait for the sun to come out to fall asleep. And I was in high school, so it was really like affecting me to the point where I reached out to a medium. And I was like, I just need to know, is there something, like, am I crazy or is there something in my house? I was very skeptical of her and mediums in general, but at this point I was desperate. And she told me things that nobody else knew, so I was like, okay, she's legit. And she did tell me, yeah, there was a man, and she had described him like we had all seen him. Tall, slender, he was around like 63 years old, which I assume was the last owner of the house. And she was basically like, yeah, like there's not much you can do. Yeah, because I did try to cleanse the house myself, like, and nothing changed. And she told me, she was like, cleansing a house is not gonna work for you. And I was like, I hadn't told her that. And I had done that a day before I had called her. And I was like, oh man, like, he let her know, like, he described my house, who was living there, and how it was even structured. So my house is thankfully very calm, but I do tend to experience things more than most. And I guess that would be like due to some past, I've become somewhat more sensitive to it. And I was also told by the medium that I was sensitive to those things and that I shouldn't feel bad. I'm not crazy. He was a mean man, he liked to get a reaction from you. He liked to scare you, or just like it became such a normal thing that like I would get angry. Like in school and I'd be like, I would hear like knocks on my door, somebody pushing on my door, or just random stuff. And I'd be angry about it, and I'd be like, come on, like I got school tomorrow, like can we not? For me, the house felt, I don't know, it felt empty. It felt lonely. Like, it just felt sad. And so did all my sisters. They felt weird. But in particularly, I felt sad, which wasn't, scary at first until it was, at night. Then you'd be creeped out. They feel like something belongs to them, so they're gonna stay there. So, like, at the same time as I am coming into your territory, so, I sympathized with whatever was going on.